This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Israeli occupation forces continued its military escalation. 2 Palestinian activists were martyred in raids in Nablus. Meanwhile, armed men killed a member from the military wing of the Hamas movement amidst escalating internal tensions in Gaza.
The
Israeli escalation, which came after an explosion attack that killed 21 Israelis last April, continues. In Nablus, 2 Palestinians were martyred in a series of attacks that will give birth to counter-violence if Israel continues to initiate further violence. The martyrdom of 2 Palestinians came after Israeli soldiers surrounded a building suspecting 3 armed men were inside and erupting in an exchange of fire with them. 2 men were killed and another was injured. Israeli forces arrested the injured man without allowing journalists to cover the scene of the incident. The 2 martyrs wore bandanas on their arms, indicating that they belonged to the Islamic Jihad movement. A Palestinian source said that they came from outside of Nablus to hide in the city. There was also an incident elsewhere in Palestine today. Armed men opened fire and killed a member of Hamas who was driving in the Jabalia refugee camp. This is the second incident in the span of 2 days when unknown armed assailants killed a senior member of the military wing of Hamas while he was driving his car in Gaza.
بينما كان يقود سيارته في غزة دون أن يعلن أحد مسؤوليته عن الحادثين.
A
German criminologist accused the Israeli Mossad and American right-wing extremists in a book recently released of assassinating former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik al-Hariri, relying on evidence that he claims was deliberately concealed by the International Investigation Committee led by former German investigator Detlef Melis. The German author says that Israel disabled the fire alarms at the headquarters of Rafik al-Hariri for reasons detailed in this report.
Jürgen Kain Kaibel went from being a German criminologist to being a staunch enemy of the International Investigation Committee in the case of al-Hariri's assassination. The author details his theory in a book claiming that hidden evidence implicates the Israeli Mossad in the assassination of al-Hariri. He also believes that an American right-wing backed mafia group may have been involved after Hariri refused to establish a military compound in northern Lebanon. The theory is backed up by evidence, according to the German criminologist. He's attempting to collect this evidence, which was not included in the international investigative reports. For example, the alarm in Hariri's car, which was allegedly disabled by Israeli-made technology.
The
Israeli citizens, Gel and Bent Eli, are the owners of this company. They used to work in Israeli military intelligence.
The author is trying to present a different viewpoint on the assassination of Hariri. He started by doubting the integrity of the head of the International Investigation Committee and said that Kofi Annan was blackmailed using the oil for food bribery case of his son as leverage. The author probed the life of his German compatriot and former international investigator Detlef Millis, accusing him of being a liar with a history of a fraud.
Condoleezza Rice was instrumental in appointing my compatriot Detlef Millis. This was not a coincidence.
لم يكن ذلك محض الصدفة. مؤسسة عالم واحد في برلين جمعت مقالات.
The One World Organization in Berlin gathered articles by the writer indicating regime change plans by the extremist right in the United States and the Lebanese government in exile, which was formed in Jerusalem under Israel's sponsorship. This book will be a voice supporting Syria in the face of international pressure.
في مواجهة الضغط الدولي.
We are pleased with this book, which contains an opposing viewpoint to the American one, which we've become used to.
Peabody contacted the International Investigation Committee to obtain documents that may help him reach the truth. However, his request was denied, which further confirmed to him that an undercover organization was responsible for al-Hariri's death, but quickly pointed the finger at Syria. This is a Western attempt in favor of Syria, which is accused of assassinating Hariri. It does not, however, appear that it will change the course of investigation after the International Investigation Committee ignored the German writer's theory.
لقي 11 شخصا مصارعهم وأصيب 5 آخرون.
A number of armed assailants opened fire on a passenger vehicle north of Ba'quba, killing 11 Iraqi civilians and injuring 5 others. As emergency vehicles arrived at the scene, a roadside bomb exploded, hitting a police car. According to an official source affiliated with the U.S. Army, a roadside bomb exploded east of Baghdad, killing an American soldier. Meanwhile, an Iraqi police source confirmed that a roadside bomb exploded in the area of Ni'maniya south of the Iraqi capital, killing an American soldier, injuring 2 others, and damaging a Hummer-type vehicle.
A new wave of armed attacks swept through several Iraqi cities and towns. An armed attack took place in the town of Ba'quba, killing 11 Iraqis. According to Sergeant Salman Dakhlaji from the Iraqi police force, a number of armed assailants opened fire on a crowd of people working for an electrical parts manufacturing factory in Ba'quba, killing 11 employees. There were conflicting reports regarding this Ba'quba bombing incident. Another police source previously reported that 7 Iraqis were killed in a car bomb explosion. Dakhlaji contradicted this report, saying that it was based on an interview with an eyewitness who gave imprecise information. In another development, a car bomb exploded near a crowded market in the city of Talafar, north of Iraq, killing 24 Iraqis and injuring 70 others. According to an American military source, the Talafar bombing attack killed 17 civilians and injured more than 130 others. Meanwhile, units of the Iraqi National Guard arrested 16 students living in the dormitory of the University of Mosul.
هذا اليوم الاثنين قامت قوات الحرس الوطني بمداهمة القسم.
Units of the Iraqi National Guard stormed into Section 8 of the student dormitory compound located in the area of Dawasa. They arrested 16 students, a security guard, and the director of the dormitory. They conducted a thorough search of dormitory rooms and mistreated the occupants.
إضافة إلى أنها قامت بتفتيش الغرف الطلبة والتعامل معهم تعامل سيء.
وفي الموصل أيضا عملت قوات الاحتلال الأمني.
In the city of Mosul, the American occupation forces painted the windows of local residents' houses red in the area of Al-Shuhada and ordered residents not to open them. They threatened local residents, saying that whoever opens a window will be subject to arrest. They painted all the windows red. We have been under a lockdown for 15 to 20 days. They advised us not to open the windows, otherwise they will destroy the house and arrest us. They also told us, through an interpreter, that the windows can only be opened by orders from the police or National Guard. They broke our windows 3 or 4 times, costing between 50,000 to 70,000 dinars. The house lacks proper air circulation and it gets very stuffy when the windows are closed.
وإلى الرمادي غربي العراق
Moreover, the occupation forces burnt down the building of the Farmers Association in the city of El Ramadi. The fire severely damaged the building, burned its contents and furniture, and destroyed the documents and files of local residents.
At 11 p.m., and according to eyewitnesses, 2 perpetrators entered the building of the Farmers Association and burned it down. This is a civil administration building, and it has nothing to do with politics. Many residents living across the street saw the suspects burning down the building. They committed this crime under the darkness of the night. The city was under curfew, and the American occupation forces were on patrol that night. The fire also destroyed the files and documents of farmers in the municipality of Anbar.
In another development, the American occupation forces stormed into and robbed several commercial shops and businesses in the city of El Ramadi.
Units of the American military forces stormed into and destroyed this retail shop. They also stole undisclosed amounts of money and merchandise. More than 3 other businesses in the neighborhood were all burglarized and destroyed. Most of the robberies took place during the night. Many merchants and business owners have closed their shops due to fear that they may be robbed by the American forces.
In addition, a group of armed assailants opened fire on a car carrying 4 police officers, killing all of them. Mohammed Aziz, Baghdad Satellite Channel.
بات شح الوقود بأنواعه يثقل كاهن المواطن العراقي.
The oil shortage is becoming a heavy burden on the shoulders of Iraqi citizens, affecting all aspects of their daily lives. Our AL-Sharqiya correspondent looks at the difficulties and challenges that people continue to face in this report.
المتواصلة تقريره التالي.
This scene is no longer an unusual one in Iraq. Scores of cars line up at gas stations waiting to fill up their tanks. It's a crisis that the people here are living. They waste time and energy, not to mention that so many cars lined up at the gas station pose considerable danger in light of the unstable security situation in the country.
We have been waiting for over an hour. Every time we try to get gas, we face the same situation.
There is no gas, no oil. We are using wood to cook.
It is a difficult crisis. We waste so much time. We come to buy gas, but we cannot. So we go back.
The fuel crisis has had many negative consequences. Due to gas shortage, gas stations have raised the price of gas per gallon, which in turn reflects on the fare charged by taxicabs for their services. As to bakeries, they are another story.
We are suffering from oil shortage. Oil costs 150 dinar per canister. We have families to provide for. Who do we turn to? The government does not make oil available to us. Every day, we have to reduce the size of the bread. People start complaining why the bread is so small. They would say, we understand that there is oil shortage, but it is not our fault. Why should we get small bread?
Iraqi families who try to provide for themselves with basic necessities are facing the added challenge of oil and gas shortage. They are hoping for a solution soon, as they are about to run out of patience.
A small container of gas is 20 or 14 dinars. We don't have men to help us afford these things. You tell me, how can we come up with this kind of money?
We are asking the government to pay attention to these wounded people who have struggled for many years. All that we want is a small sacrifice.
The people we met have all expressed concern that finding solutions to this crisis is not a top priority for government officials who are occupied with their own positions and their own personal advancement. It's odd that Iraq, which is considered one of the highest producing countries of oil and among the largest oil reserves, is suffering an oil crisis today. Isn't it time to solve this problem, or will it be left unabated?
A number of Iraqi security officials, tribal leaders, and religious clerks demanded that American military forces accompany the Iraqi forces during police raids at mosques and holy shrines in Baghdad. This news came after an increase in the number of raids carried out by armed groups claiming to be members of the security and police forces. Meanwhile, the American army has confirmed that 2 U.S. soldiers were killed in 2 separate bomb attacks in southwestern Baghdad. According to an official source affiliated with the Iraqi Ministry of Interior, a bomb went off near the Abu Ja'far al-Mansur Square west of Baghdad, killing 4 city workers and injuring another. Moreover, Mr. Firas Muhammad, a prominent prosecutor in the Karikh Municipal Court of Justice, was gunned down in broad daylight by unknown armed men. He was killed while driving his car near the court's main building in Baghdad. Moreover, several armed assailants killed a female history teacher in the city of Baquba for unknown reasons.
4 Iraqis were killed and another was wounded in a bomb attack in the area of Hayy al-Mansur near the Iraqi capital. The target was some city workers who were cleaning at the Abu Ja'far al-Mansur Square, which has witnessed an increase in the number of armed attacks in recent days.
A bomb went off near the Abu Ja'far al-Mansur Square, killing 4 city workers and injuring another.
The Iraqi security forces rushed to the scene of the incident and cordoned off the area as investigators gathered evidence to find the real reasons behind the attack. It is worth mentioning that the Abbasid Caliph Abu Ja'far al-Mansur statue was vandalized a few months ago by unknown assailants. According to an Iraqi police source, a mortar attack was launched east of the Iraqi capital, hitting a bridge. There were no reports of casualties. Most of the mortar attacks are launched from the unspecified areas and hit unspecified targets. Meanwhile, unknown assailants gunned down a female history teacher who works at a high school near the area of Tahrir in southeastern Baquba, which has been witnessing security escalation in the past few months.
The victim was a teacher at a high school. Her cousin, who is also her brother-in-law, and another cousin were also killed last year. Another second cousin was also killed. Her brother was killed last year at his house in Rumana. Another brother was released from prison yesterday, and today she was gunned down.
A new wave of violence has been unleashed in Iraq, targeting Iraqi intellectuals. Many have been killed, arrested, threatened, or forced to leave Iraq.
Why are they targeting the noble and straight people of Iraq? They are not after the collaborators. Is this the fate of those who defended Iraq? Why are they killing our children? Those killers are collaborators. Why and how did we get into this miserable situation? Have fear of God.
The escalation in the security situation in Iraq is derailing the political process and pulling the country to a dangerous curve. According to the Iraqi President Jalal Talabani, more than 1,000 Iraqis have been killed during the month of April.
The United States circulated a draft UN resolution that sets a May 30 deadline for deploying an assessment team to Sudan's war-torn region to prepare a UN takeover of the African Union peacekeeping mission. The new text, expected to be taken up by the 15-member Security Council during closed-door consultations Friday, seeks to build on the momentum created by the AU-brokered peace accords signed between Khartoum and the main Darfur rebel group of Abuja, Nigeria last week. It calls on the parties to the Abuja Accords to cooperate with the AU, the UN and member states to accelerate transition to a United Nations operation, and calls for the immediate deployment of a joint African Union and United Nations technical assessment mission no later than May 13. That assessment team would be tasked with working out with the AU and Sudanese authorities how to strengthen the capacity of the beleaguered 7,000-strong AU force in Darfur during the transition of the UN force, which is not expected to be deployed before late this year. The draft also calls on UN Chief Kofi Annan to submit recommendations to Security Council within 7 days of the return of the assessment team on all key aspects of the future UN operation, including force structure, additional force requirements, potential troop contributing countries, and a detailed financial evaluation of future costs. The text, which U.S. diplomats hope to put to a vote early next week, drops an explicit call in the earlier version to shift some troops from the 10,100-strong UN mission currently deployed in South Sudan to Darfur. It also urged those parties that have not yet signed the Abuja Accord to do so without delay and not act in any way that would impede implementation of the agreement. The deal reached in Abuja last week was accepted by the Khartoum government and the main faction of the larger of the two main rebel movements, the Sudanese Liberation Movement, SLM. The United Nations Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Jan Egeland's two-day trip to Darfur highlighted the desperate conditions the displaced are living in. Egeland's trip shed light on the humanitarian situation in the vast Darfur area and also encouraged different groups that have been at war with each other to take advantage of a recent peace deal signed in Abuja, Nigeria, and opt for peace in the area. Whilst in Gurida, Egeland talked to some recently displaced widows who explained that they had lost all their livestock as they fled recent attacks. Egeland also met some local authorities, the African Union, NGOs, and humanitarian partners and tribal leaders. The United Nations estimates that close to 120,000 internally displaced people live there. They have been arriving here since 2004 due to attacks in a number of villages in the area. The attacks are said to have been by the Janjaweed, an indigenous rebel group in the region. On the second day of his Darfur trip, he visited Kalma camp and was met by thousands of Darfurian displaced at a peaceful demonstration. The protests deteriorated into a skirmish, which resulted in the death of Sudanese translator with the African Union. At the press conference in Khartoum, Egeland told reporters there was much to worry about for the future of Darfur. The civil war in the Darfur region in the country's west has resulted in the death of tens of thousands of people and more than 1.8 million others displaced. Thousands of Eritreans displaced from their villages near the Ethiopian border during the Horn of Africa and neighbors' bloody 1998-2000 war have returned to their homes. In the latest such repatriation, the Information Ministry said in a statement posted on its website that 5,000 war-displaced people had gone back to their villages near the Ethiopian border last week. Earlier this month, Asmara announced that another batch of 5,000 war-displaced Eritreans had returned to their homes at the end of April. It said their homes were in the Dabab southern region that hugs the Ethiopian border, where the situation is described by the UN peacekeeping mission here as tense. Diplomatic sources in Asmara estimate that following the return of the 10,000 displaced people in May and April, about 40,000 Eritreans remain displaced. UN says Ethiopia is parched from lack of rain and stripped bare by cattle escaping the drought in neighboring Kenya and Somalia. UNICEF Executive Director ANB TV said the Horn of Africa is a region in crisis. Children are hungry and so are their parents. They are among an estimated 8 million people affected by the drought sweeping one of the most vulnerable corners of the world. At the neighboring 2006, UNICEF appealed for $16 million to fund life-saving emergency relief, clean water, nutrition support, and measles immunization. There are 1.5 million children under the age of 5 in the Horn of Africa who are particularly vulnerable to undernutrition. With early intervention, UNICEF hopes to give all children and women affected by the drought a better chance of survival.
Officials of the Nigerian Red Cross search in vain for people injured following a pipeline blast near Nigerian commercial capital Lagos, in which up to 200 people were burned to death. Police said up to 200 people burned to death in a fireball on Friday when a vandalized fuel pipeline blew up at a beach village near Nigeria's economic capital, Lagos. Scorched beyond recognition, corpses floated on the water or laid exposed on the sand, the horror still etched in some faces as rescue workers and police picked through the charred remains. Lagos police chief told reporters the estimated number of people who died in between 150 and 200. The people who died in the inferno are suspected to be pipeline vandals, although another official put the toll at more than 200. He also said the area has been protected. The Nigerian Red Cross had earlier reported more than 100 deaths from the blast at Lado Beach village near Apapa seaport, where numerous oil installations are located. The explosion is the latest in a string of pipeline-related disasters that have befallen Nigeria in the past 8 years. Residents in Lagos said they saw a huge column of thick black smoke rising into the air from the vicinity. Nigerian Red Cross Secretary General said that the Red Cross workers have found evidence that people had been trying to siphon fuel from the pipeline. On part of the pipeline that was unearthed, the metal had been pierced and at least 3 holes to extract the fuel were visible. The bodies of victims nearest the bursting pipeline were either turned to ashes, which dissolved in the lagoon, or were reduced to skeletal remains. Close to 2,000 people have died in more than a dozen pipeline explosions across the country between 1998 and 2003. Heavy fighting engulfs the lawless Somali capital for a 7th straight day. At least 2 civilians were killed and 5 others wounded overnight in Mogadishu as heavy fighting between gunmen allied to a U.S.-backed warlord alliance and militia continued. Heavy fighting were reported on Saturday in Mogadishu's northern Sisi district, the epicenter of the week-long gun battles, while sporadic gunfire was heard in Hirowa and Wahrad and Yakshed districts in north and south of the capital, where the militia have also engaged in fighting. Saturday's clashes bring to at least 102 the number of fatalities since the fighting flared in the war-shattered capital on Sunday. More than 200 people, many of them civilians, whose homes have been destroyed by mortar and artillery fire, have been injured in the fighting. The fighting has continued despite appeals for calm by the United Nations, the United States, and Somalia's largely powerless transitional government currently based in the town of Baidoa, west of Mogadishu. UN Chief Kofi Annan called for an immediate ceasefire between warring factions. In a statement, the UN Secretary General also urged all Somali parties to support transitional federal institutions in their effort to implement the country's interim constitution known as the Traditional Charter, or rather the Transitional Charter. At least 4 people have been killed and more than 42 injured after 9 bombs exploded in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa on Friday. The bombs struck across the city in Addis Ababa's busy Mercato, the main shopping district. The first blast damaged an Ethiopian Airlines office. According to witnesses, 7 people were injured in a second blast, which happened near the headquarters of the city's electricity company. 7 more people were injured when another explosion blew out the front of a city bus. Witnesses said 2 people died and 7 were injured in another bomb detonated outside a cafe. One witness described seeing customers knocked out of their chairs and 2 waitresses thrown across the veranda when the bomb exploded on the sidewalk outside. On Friday afternoon, a man died when a device detonated in the rear of a small bus. 16 people were also injured. Witnesses also said another blast destroyed a minibus taxi in front of a secondary school. There are no reports of anyone being hurt. 2 more bombs detonated near the bus station in the Mercato, one in a public toilet inside a hotel, injuring 3, and the second outside of a barber shop, injuring 2. The 9th bomb went off under a bridge but did not cause any injuries or significant damage. No group has yet taken responsibility for the blasts, but police say they were coordinated attacks aimed at discrediting the government. The attacks come just days before the anniversary of last year's general election.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin. This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.